Why was the desert so quiet tonight? Too quiet for a war zone. The wind pressed against the razor wire like a whisper that didn't dare speak. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a generator coughed and went silent. And in the flicker of a dying floodlight, Captain Lena Cruz adjusted her rifle strap and pretended her hands weren't shaking. No one noticed. At least, she hoped they didn't. She kept her eyes on the horizon, a smear of sand and moonlight, but her thoughts snagged on the sound of distant rotors that weren't supposed to be there. The ops map had said clear skies, no inbound traffic until dawn. So why did she hear a helicopter? Sergeant Rafi leaned on a Humvee humming off-key to fill the silence. His voice broke the tension like a bad joke, but even he kept glancing at the darkness beyond the perimeter. "You hear that?" he muttered. Lena nodded once, a quick motion. "Don't announce it." Her voice was low, even the way she'd been trained. She was supposed to be calm. She was supposed to be the officer everyone trusted when things went wrong. But there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. She felt the memory before she saw it. The last time she'd heard a phantom rotor where none should be. It had been 3 years ago, over a village whose name she couldn't pronounce anymore without tasting ashes. That night had ended in smoke, screaming, and a promise she swore she'd never break again. Rafi squinted toward the hills. Could be an illusion, wind bouncing sound. "Could be," she said, but it was. She knew the cadence of a Black Hawk blade when it cut through desert air, and she knew that whatever was out there wasn't friendly. The camp looked asleep, rows of tents barely moving under a blanket of cold desert air. But Lena felt the weight of eyes on her. She turned, and there was Corporal Diaz, the youngest in her unit, barely 22, watching her with quiet expectation. His helmet was too big for him, his courage too. "You need me on the tower, ma'am?" Diaz asked, voice cracking slightly. "Not yet," she said. She hesitated, then added softer, "Stay close, though, just in case." He nodded, eager but scared. Lena remembered being him once, believing orders were shields and leaders had answers. She didn't have answers tonight. Another gust of wind hissed through the wire. The floodlight gave a last flicker and went dark. The compound's shadows stretched long and unfamiliar. Someone cursed under their breath. Lena's earpiece crackled. Command chatter was thin, fragmented. Someone at HQ was asleep, or maybe someone didn't want them to know what was coming. She thought of the briefing that afternoon, how her request for additional reconnaissance had been waved off like an inconvenience. "It's a milk run," the major had said. "Nothing but sand and silence." Sand and silence. She wanted to laugh, but it came out as a dry breath. Behind her, Rafi spoke again. "You think they know something we do?" She didn't answer, not because she didn't know, but because she did. The helicopter sound faded, swallowed by distance or by intention. That was worse. It meant whoever it was didn't want to be found. She moved through the compound, boots crunching softly on gravel. Each tent she passed was a pocket of fragile dreams. Men and women curled in sleeping bags, some murmuring in half-remembered languages. She caught glimpses: a photo taped above a cot, a worn Bible under a pillow, a hand clutching a dog tag even in sleep. Little anchors to a world far away. She envied them for a moment, for being able to close their eyes. In the comms tent, the glow of a single monitor painted her face in cold blue light. She tapped the radio, adjusted the frequency. Static. She tried another channel. Static again. Diaz followed her in, nervous energy radiating from him. "Ma'am, are we compromised?" She took a long breath. "Not yet, maybe not at all." A pause, "But get your gear ready." She didn't tell him about the memory clawing at the back of her mind. The last time she'd heard silence like this, right before everything broke. Outside, the sky was a canvas of hard stars, the kind that feel too sharp to belong to Earth. Somewhere far to the east, faint flashes of distant artillery turned the horizon into a heartbeat. She found herself thinking about her sister again, Anna, who had begged her not to take this mission. Anna's voice had been quiet, almost resigned. "You're still chasing ghosts," she'd said over the phone, the sound of their mother cooking in the background. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore." But Lena did. Not to anyone else, to herself. To the memory of a boy whose name she couldn't say without her throat tightening. To the villagers who never saw dawn again. To the promise that she'd never freeze, never hesitate, never fail like that night. A soft shuffle of boots approached. Lieutenant Harris' older, tired eyes, salt and pepper beard, stopped beside her. He smelled faintly of tobacco. "You hear it too?" "Yeah. You tell command." "I tried," she shook her head. No response. He rubbed his face with one hand. "Could be nothing." "It's not." They stood in silence for a moment. Harris sighed. "You ever get tired of being right about the worst stuff?" She didn't answer. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest echo of something metallic, a clank like gear settling on rock. Rafi's voice came over comms, lower now. "Movement on the ridge. Small. Could be wind or not." Lena felt the pulse in her neck quicken. Everyone up, quiet, no lights. The compound transformed in seconds. Soft snores turned to the whisper of zippers and the shuffle of boots. Figures emerged, half-armored, eyes wide. Someone muttered a prayer. Someone else cursed the cold. Lena scanned the faces, young, old, scared, pretending not to be. She saw Diaz fumbling with his magazine, hands trembling. She put a hand over his. "Steady," she said. Just one word, but it steadied her too. Then through the scope of her rifle the ridge came into focus. Nothing, just rocks and shadows, but the shadows didn't sit right. One was too still, another too sharp. She blinked. A faint glimmer, glass-catching moonlight winked from a crevice. A scope, watching them. She almost shouted, but a voice inside her whispered, "Wait." She waited, counted heartbeats. The wind picked up, disguising her breath. The glimmer vanished. She lowered her rifle, but her heart was still hammering. She keyed her comm. "We're being watched," she said softly. "Stay low, don't give them a reason yet." A pause crackled back. Rafi's voice, "How many?" "Don't know." Harris, "Could be scouts, could be a bluff." Or, Lena said, "Could be the beginning." A silence heavier, then gunfire settled over the camp. The hours stretched thin. The men and women huddled behind sandbags and vehicles, scanning the ridge. The helicopter never returned, or maybe it had just been a ghost. The stars kept their cold vigil. Somewhere in that long watch, Diaz whispered, "Ma'am, what if they don't come?" Lena kept her eyes on the horizon. "Then we wait anyway." He swallowed hard. "Were you ever scared, like before you were, good at this?" She almost smiled. "Still am," she said, and it was the truest thing she'd spoken all night. The confession settled over them, strange comfort in its honesty. Diaz exhaled, a shaky laugh. Another hour passed, then another. Fingers went numb. Joints ached. Sleep tugged at heavy eyelids. Harris muttered stories about his kids to keep himself awake, small stories, silly ones, the kind you tell when you're trying not to think about dying. Lena listened, quiet, letting the sound of human life anchor her. She pictured Anna's kitchen light, warm and golden, the smell of rice on the stove. She let herself miss home for one fragile second. Then movement. A shadow broke from the ridge, quick, deliberate. Lena's finger tightened on the trigger, but before she could fire, the shadow stopped, too far to shoot, too close to ignore. It raised something, just a hand. No, a signal. She couldn't tell. "Hold," she whispered. The shadow melted back into darkness. The silence that followed was worse than noise. She lowered her rifle slowly, but the unease remained. The ridge was empty again, but the memory of that small, deliberate motion burned into her vision. It wasn't random. It wasn't a mistake. Something was coming. And for the first time that night, she felt the weight of what she'd promised herself 3 years ago. That she wouldn't freeze when the moment came. That she'd be ready, no matter the cost. The desert breathed around her, cold, wide, and merciless. And Lena Cruz, her tears hidden beneath grit and discipline, tightened her grip on the rifle and waited. Why did the signal feel personal, like someone out there knew her name? The desert didn't answer. It never did. It just held its breath, waiting for someone to make the first mistake. Lena's knuckles ached from gripping the rifle too hard. She loosened her hold, flexed her fingers, tried to breathe. The memory of the glimmering scope and the raised hand replayed in her mind like an echo she couldn't mute. She didn't want to admit it, but it reminded her of Diego. She could still see him, a village boy with a shy smile and a toy helicopter he'd carved from scrap wood. 3 years ago, on another ridge, Diego had waved before the shooting started. She had hesitated then. That hesitation had cost lives. The guilt had shadowed her every mission since. The wind shifted, carrying a faint tang of burned fuel. It was gone almost as soon as she noticed it, but it was enough to tell her this wasn't a mirage. There were people out there, real, armed, and watching. Harris crouched beside her, the creak of his knee loud in the silence. "What's your read?" She kept her eyes on the horizon. "They're testing us, seeing how we react." "You think it's the local militia?" "Could be, or someone worse." She didn't elaborate. She didn't want to say the name that had been whispered in rumors for months. The rogue unit of mercenaries who'd ambushed convoys, vanished, then reappeared miles away like ghosts. The ones command insisted didn't exist. Rafi's voice cut in on comms. "Movement at 3 o'clock, small group maybe 4. Lena signaled to Diaz and 2 others. "Flank right, low and quiet." Diaz nodded, face pale but determined. The kid didn't know yet that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was carrying your fear like a secret weight and moving anyway. The group disappeared into the darkness. Lena adjusted her position behind a sandbag wall, listening to her heartbeat drum in her ears. Minutes passed, too many. Then gunfire, just 3 shots sharp and distant, then silence. "Diaz," she hissed into her mic. "Static." Diaz report. "Nothing." She felt her chest tighten. Not panic, not yet, but the kind of dread that feels like the world narrowing. Harris cursed under his breath. "Should we?" "Hold," Lena said. Her voice was steady, but her nails bit into her palm. "If we rush, we give them our position." Another minute crawled by. Then Diaz's voice crackled back, faint and breathless. "Contact, 2 hostiles neutralized, 1 wounded, 1 ran." Lena exhaled slowly, the tension easing just a fraction. "Status?" "No casualties, but a pause. Ma'am, they weren't locals. They had NATO-grade gear." The words hung heavy in the night air. Harris's eyes met hers. "Mercs." She didn't respond, didn't need to. The camp stirred restlessly, boots shuffling, whispered curses, someone's quiet prayer. Fear was contagious. Lena knew she had to ground them. She slung her rifle and climbed onto the nearest Humvee, the metal cold against her gloves. The faces turned toward her, some barely visible in the moonlight. "We hold the line," she said, voice low but clear. "We're trained, we're ready, they want us to panic, we don't give them that." A murmur of assent rippled through the group, not loud but enough. Rafi cracked a grin, forced but welcome. "Guess we're not getting sleep tonight, huh?" Someone chuckled nervously. Even that small sound felt like a victory, proof they weren't broken yet. Hours crawled by. The desert wind picked up, carrying whispers through the wire. Lena walked the perimeter again and again, her boots tracing the same paths, her mind tracing older ones. She thought of Anna, probably asleep now in their mother's old house, unaware her sister was standing on a ridge halfway around the world, staring down invisible enemies. She thought of the day she enlisted, the arguments, the slammed doors. Their father had been a pilot, lost in a storm over the Hindu Kush when Lena was 16. Flying was in her blood, but loss was too. Maybe that's why she'd chosen this life, to make sense of the senseless, to balance the scales in a war that never seemed to end. A low voice broke her thoughts. Harris again, standing close enough for only her to hear. "You think Command sent us out here to be bait?" The question burned because she'd already asked herself the same thing. "I think Command doesn't tell us everything." He gave a dry laugh, understatement of the year. In the distance, coyotes howled, a sound too alive for this dead place. Then came a flash on the ridge, brief but real. Not lightning, not a star. A flare. Before Lena could shout a warning, the world erupted. Tracer rounds sliced through the darkness, red streaks painting the night. The camp exploded into chaos, shouts, scrambling boots, the clatter of rifles. Sandbags tore under fire. A Humvee windshield shattered. Someone screamed. Lena dropped to a knee, returning fire in controlled bursts. Dust choked the air, stinging her eyes. Rafi dove beside her, cursing in 2 languages. Harris barked orders, rallying their people into defensive positions. Through the haze, Lena caught sight of Diaz dragging a wounded private behind cover, his helmet askew, his face pale but resolute. Pride and fear twisted in her chest. She ducked as a bullet sparked off metal inches from her head. Her breath came ragged, but her mind sharpened. She counted muzzle flashes on the ridge. 6, maybe 7, well coordinated, too disciplined to be locals. She keyed her mic. "Hold positions, conserve ammo, they want to draw us out." "Back up," Rafi shouted over the din. She didn't answer. Backup wasn't coming, not tonight. The firefight stretched on, bursts of gunfire, then lulls of aching silence. During one of those silences, Lena's thoughts betrayed her, slipping back to Diego's small hand waving under a moonlit sky. She could almost hear his voice, asking why she hadn't warned them sooner. Another volley tore through the compound, snapping her back to the present. She felt anger then, not at the mercs, not even at Command, but at herself, for hesitating to trust her own instincts earlier in the night. She rose slightly, sighted through her scope and found a target, a shadow against the ridge. One shot, clean, the shadow dropped. The sound was swallowed by the wind, but the camp felt it, the shift, the brief surge of confidence. Minutes later, the firing slowed. The ridge emptied, the enemy fading back into the desert as quietly as they'd appeared. Silence returned, an even heavier silence than before. The wounded were few but serious. Rafi knelt beside a medic pressing gauze against a bleeding leg. Harris took count, his face grim. Diaz sat on the ground, helmet off, hands trembling, staring at the blood on his gloves. Lena approached him, crouched low. "You did good," she said softly. He didn't look up, didn't feel good. "It never does," she replied. She let the words hang there, unpolished and honest. She didn't tell him it would get easier, because it wouldn't. But she hoped he'd hear the unspoken truth. Surviving mattered, even when it didn't feel like winning. As the medics worked, Harris joined her. "They'll be back." She nodded, "And next time they'll bring more." Rafi walked over, face streaked with grime and fatigue. "Still no comms." She shook her head. "Jammed, we're on our own until sunrise." He glanced at the wounded, then at her. "So what now?" Lena looked back toward the ridge, empty now, but alive with memory and possibility. The stars overhead felt sharper than before, cruel in their indifference. She tightened her strap, adjusted her rifle. "Now," she said quietly, "we wait, and we hold." The desert night closed in again, vast and merciless. And though her tears stayed hidden behind grit and duty, her quiet courage began to hum, an invisible thread binding the shaken souls around her. In the darkness, she whispered to herself, barely audible, "Not this time, I won't fail them." And the wind carried the promise away, out over the empty sands, toward whoever was listening. Why did sunrise feel so far away, like the night itself wanted them trapped here? The hours between battles are the cruelest. The desert seemed to stretch wider, the stars sharper, every sound magnified against the quiet. Lena Cruz sat with her back to a Humvee tire, helmet off, rifle balanced across her knees. Her breath fogged faintly in the cold. She was tired, bone-deep tired, but she wouldn't close her eyes. Not yet. Around her, the camp was a patchwork of exhaustion. Medics whispered over the wounded. Harris walked a slow perimeter, his limp more pronounced now that the adrenaline had faded. Rafi busied himself with ammo boxes, the clatter of metal a brittle disguise for his worry. Diaz crouched beside a barrel fire, his young face lit by trembling flames, staring at nothing. The ridge was quiet again, but it was the wrong kind of quiet, the kind that felt intentional. Lena watched a shooting star streak across the horizon. For a heartbeat, it was beautiful, too beautiful for this place. It reminded her of nights on the porch of her childhood home, Anna beside her, their father pointing at constellations, telling them that the sky was a map for the lost. Back then, she'd believed maps always led you home. Now she wasn't sure home was even a place anymore. Harris joined her, settling heavily onto a crate. "You look like hell," he said gently. "Thanks," she murmured. "You ever think," he continued, "maybe we're just pawns in someone else's game?" She didn't answer. She thought it too many times to count. He rubbed his hands together for warmth. "When I was a kid, I thought war was about heroes. Turns out it's mostly about waiting and losing." Lena glanced at him. His eyes were distant, haunted. He'd lost friends, she could hear it in the weight of his words. "Why do you stay?" she asked quietly. He chuckled without humor. "Because if I don't, somebody else has to, and maybe they're not ready." She nodded. She understood too well. A faint crackle of static hissed through her radio, so faint she almost missed it. She adjusted the dial, held her breath. A voice flickered in and out, distorted. Then bait, extraction compromised. Then silence. She swore under her breath. Someone was trying to warn them or mock them. Rafi approached, wiping dust from his face. "We need water rations distributed, and Diaz is freezing. He's trying not to show it." Lena followed his gaze. The kid's hands were shaking violently now. She walked over, crouched beside him. Gloves too thin. He nodded, embarrassed. She dug into her pack, pulled out a spare pair. "Here." He hesitated. "You need." "Take them," her tone softened. "I'll be fine." Diaz slid the gloves on, whispering, "Thanks, ma'am." For a moment, the night didn't feel quite as empty. Then the wind shifted again, carrying a low thump, distant but distinct. Not gunfire, not a helicopter, something heavier, deeper. "Mortars?" Rafi asked, appearing at her shoulder. Lena frowned, too slow, too deliberate. A second thump echoed, closer. The ridge was still empty, or appeared to be, but she knew better now. The mercenaries weren't gone. They were adjusting, repositioning, preparing. She keyed her mic. "Stay low, spread out, don't cluster." Diaz's nervous voice crackled back. "What is it?" "Don't know yet." In truth, she had a theory. A memory surfaced. A night raid in Kandahar, the enemy drawing fire just to gauge their response. They'd done it then, too. Small, deliberate noises to pull attention, to map their defense. She felt anger stir. Anger at command for sending them here with incomplete intel. Anger at the mercs for playing games with lives. Anger at herself for not having a perfect answer. A sudden gust kicked sand across her face, stinging her eyes. She blinked through the grit, scanning the horizon again. And then she saw it. Not a flare, not a muzzle flash, just a shadow barely perceptible moving against the stars. A drone. Small, silent, circling overhead. Lena's stomach dropped. If they had eyes on the camp, then the next move wouldn't be small. "Cover the lights," she snapped. Rafi and Harris moved fast, dousing the barrel fire, plunging the camp into darkness. The wounded groaned as medics shifted them deeper into shadow. For a long stretch there was nothing, only the sound of the wind, the low hum of the drone fatting. Then a new sound, footsteps, multiple, too close. Rafi raised his rifle. Harris crouched, jaw clenched. Lena's pulse hammered in her ears. The footsteps stopped just beyond the outer wire. A voice called out, calm, male-accented, "Captain Cruz." The sound was like a stone dropped into a still pond. Rafi muttered a curse. Harris shot her a glance. "They know your name." The voice came again. "We don't want your people, just you." The words tightened her throat. Memories surged. Diego's wave, her father's last flight, Anna's plea. She swallowed them down. "Who are you?" she called back, forcing her voice to remain even. A pause, then a reminder. Then silence. Footsteps receded into the darkness. Rafi exhaled sharply. "What the hell does that mean?" Lena didn't answer. Her hands felt cold even through her gloves. Whoever they weren't just mercenaries. They had a message, and they'd chosen her for a reason. She looked at the faces around her, Diaz wide-eyed, Harris grim, Rafi restless. Their fear was tangible. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. "We hold," she said finally, voice firm, "until dawn." But inside, doubt gnawed at her. What if dawn didn't bring safety? What if dawn was the trap? She checked her rifle again, more out of habit than need. The metal felt like an anchor in her hands, solid, unyielding. She wasn't sure if she was steadying herself or the weapon. The stars overhead seemed crueler now, their beauty indifferent. Somewhere out there, Anna might be waking up, making coffee, unaware her sister was a name whispered by enemies in the desert. Lena tightened her jaw. If they wanted her, they'd have to get through her people first, and she wasn't ready to give them up. Not tonight. The wind shifted once more, carrying the faint echo of distant laughter, soft, eerie, out of place. Maybe it was just the desert playing tricks, or maybe it was a promise. Either way, Lena Cruz stayed alert, her quiet courage a silent beacon against the vast, waiting dark. What kind of enemy calls your name in the dark, then walks away? The question haunted Lena long after the footsteps faded. She crouched beside the wire again, fingers brushing cold steel as if the barrier could answer. But the desert offered only silence, vast and merciless. The camp stirred behind her. Rafi paced, muttering curses under his breath, his boots scraping the gravel. Diaz sat cross-legged with his helmet in his lap, staring at nothing, his breath shallow. Harris stood watch on a Humvee roof, his silhouette sharp against the horizon. Lena's throat felt tight. They were scared, and so was she. But a leader couldn't afford to show fear, not when the night was listening. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the wind cool her face. Anna's voice drifted back to her, a memory. "You can't keep trying to fix ghosts, Lena. You'll break yourself." She laughed at the time, pretending the words didn't sting. But tonight, under a foreign sky, the truth of them pressed hard against her ribs. She opened her eyes to the distant ridge, empty, yet alive with menace. "Ma'am," Diaz's voice was hesitant. "Why didn't they attack?" She looked at him, at the faint tremble in his jaw. "Because they don't need to yet." Rafi stopped packing. "So what now? They wait for reinforcements, or just to mess with us?" Lena hesitated. "They're drawing this out, testing us, and maybe," she paused, forcing herself to speak the thought aloud, "maybe they want me to doubt myself." The admission felt dangerous, like exposing a weakness, but it was the truth. Harris climbed down from the Humvee, landing with a grunt. "You've been on their radar before." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she scanned the darkness again, every shadow a possibility. Finally, she said, 3 years ago, another op, another ridge." Rafi frowned. "The village thing." She nodded. "Different players, same tactics." No one spoke after that. They didn't need to. The silence was heavy enough. A medic approached, her face pale under the moonlight. "Private Ellison's stable for now, but we're out of morphine. If he crashes—" Her voice trailed off. Lena's stomach clenched. They'd trained for this, low supplies, isolation, but hearing it spoken aloud always made the danger more real. She put a hand on the medic's shoulder. "Keep him warm. Do what you can. Dawn's not far. The medic nodded, lips pressed tight, and hurried back to the wounded. Lena walked the perimeter again, her boots crunching softly. Each tent she passed felt fragile, as if one wrong move could unravel everything. She paused near Diaz, who was quietly humming to himself, off-key, nervous. It reminded her of the villagers she'd known, humming to chase fear away. She crouched beside him, "You holding up?" He shrugged, but his eyes were glassy. "Trying not to think about my mom, but it's all I can think about." Lena felt a pang, an echo of her own thoughts about Anna. "Thinking about her isn't weakness," she said gently. "It's why you're still here." He nodded, swallowing hard. A faint hum reached her ears then, a vibration more felt than heard. She stiffened, scanning the horizon. The hum grew, a drone's soft whine, low and deliberate. It circled overhead, a silent predator. "Lights out," she whispered. The camp obeyed instantly, sinking into darkness. The drone passed, a small shape against the stars, then veered off. But the message was clear. They were still being watched. Minutes stretched into hours. The cold deepened, seeping through armor and skin. Somewhere beyond the ridge, coyotes called again, wild and distant. Harris approached quietly, carrying 2 tin cups of weak coffee. He handed one to her. "Figured you wouldn't ask for it." She accepted with a small nod. The bitter liquid burned her throat, grounding her. "You ever wonder," Harris said after a moment, "if the people on the other side, if they're just like us?" She glanced at him. "They are." He nodded slowly. "Makes it harder." "It should," she said. The words hung between them, fragile but firm. Rafi's voice broke the silence, urgent but controlled. "Contact, North Ridge, 2 figures." Lena swung her rifle up, sighting along the barrel. 2 silhouettes, small, distant, moved cautiously across the ridge, not advancing, just packing. She tracked them through her scope. They weren't firing, weren't even trying to hide. "They're baiting us," she murmured. Diaz whispered on comms, "Should I take the shot?" "Negative," she replied. The figures stopped, then raised their hands, palms out, a universal gesture. But even from this distance, something felt wrong. The movements were too mechanical, too synchronized. A sudden gust revealed the truth. They weren't men at all. Just decoys, cutouts strapped to poles, moving on a wire in the wind. Rafi cursed, "They're playing with us." Lena lowered her rifle, jaw tight. This wasn't just strategy, it was psychological warfare. They wanted her tired, angry, reckless. The sky to the east began to pale, the first hint of dawn. But instead of relief, dread settled heavier on her chest. Dawn didn't feel like rescue tonight. The medic's voice called out softly, "Captain Ellison's fatting. We need to move him." Lena's heart sank. Moving a wounded man in open desert was a risk, but leaving him as he was could be fatal. She knelt beside the medic, checking Ellison's pale face. His breath was shallow, his lips cracked. He was barely conscious. "Wrap him tight," Lena said quietly. "We'll find a depression near the south berm, less exposure." Rafi and Diaz moved to help, lifting the stretcher carefully. Harris kept watch, scanning the horizon. As they carried Ellison, Lena felt the weight of every choice pressing on her. Each decision was a gamble, a balance between survival and sacrifice. And somewhere out there, the enemy was watching, waiting for her to misstep. When they reached the berm, they lowered Ellison gently. The medic worked quickly, tucking blankets around him. His eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused. "Ma'am," his voice was a rasp, "am I gonna make it?" Lena crouched close, meeting his gaze. She didn't lie, not completely. "You're tougher than this night," she said softly. A faint smile tugged at his lips before exhaustion pulled him under. As the first rays of sunlight brushed the ridge, painting the desert in gold and blood, Lena scanned the horizon again. The ridge was empty, too empty. Rafi muttered, "Where the hell did they go?" "They're not gone," she said. "They're just waiting for us to move." The sunlight felt cruel, bright but offering no warmth, no safety. Lena stood there a long moment, the rifle heavy in her hands, her hidden tears locked behind grit and resolve. She knew what the mercenaries were doing. She knew the game wasn't over. And she knew, deep in her bones, that the loudest memories aren't made in victory or defeat, but in the quiet moments between, when courage has no audience. The sun was a pale coin in the sky, but the desert stayed cold, a deceptive kind of morning. Lena crouched in the brittle grass near the berm, watching Ellison's chest rise and fall in shallow, uncertain breaths. Every sound felt amplified now, the creak of leather straps, the faint whistle of wind across the sand. Her squad moved with the cautious precision of people who knew the world was watching. Rafi approached, scanning the horizon. "We need comms, ma'am, even a garbled ping." Lena nodded. The satellite unit had been jammed since midnight. Whoever they were up against, they weren't improvising. This was coordinated, professional. She slung her rifle and climbed to a small ridge to search for signal. Nothing, just static. She bit her lip, tasting salt and dust. Harris's voice crackled softly in her earpiece. "Still no movement. They're making a stew." Stew, the word fit. She could almost feel the enemy's satisfaction in the stillness. She checked her watch, 6:20 hours. Reinforcements weren't due until noon, if the request had even gone through. That was a big if. Rafi joined her on the ridge, his jaw set. "You think this is personal, the way they said your name?" Lena didn't answer immediately. The name, her name, hadn't been an accident. It had been a needle slipped under her skin. "Feels like it," she admitted finally. Rafi's eyes were wary. "Someone from the village op." She exhaled slowly. "Could be, or someone who wants me to think that." A movement on the far ridge caught her eye, just a flicker. She froze, raised her scope. Through the heat shimmer, a figure stood briefly on a boulder, watching. The figure didn't move like a scout or a soldier. It was deliberate, almost theatrical. Then in a heartbeat, it vanished. Lena lowered the scope. The figure's presence wasn't a tactical mistake. It was an invitation. She felt the weight of an old photograph in her breast pocket, a tattered image of her and Anna at a shooting competition years ago, grinning like they didn't know what war could take. She kept it there not as a charm but as a reminder, of family, of promises, of why she fought. Now that same world felt ready to crumble. She descended back to the berm where Diaz was heating instant coffee over a tiny flame. The rich smell clashed with the tension. Diaz handed her a tin cup without looking at her. "Thanks," she said quietly. He nodded, lips pressed tight. "I saw you up there, saw something." "Maybe," she replied, "or maybe they wanted me to." Diaz didn't press. The unspoken fear hung between them. If this was a trap, every decision they made was being manipulated. Harris called softly from the Humvee, "Tracks, south side, fresh." Lena strode over, her boots crunching softly on gravel. Harris pointed to faint impressions in the dust, wide, deliberate prints. Not boots, tires, two vehicles heavy. Rafi cursed under his breath. "We're boxed." "No," Lena said, kneeling to study the tracks. "Not yet, they're circling, herding us toward something." The medic approached, breathless. "Ellison's stable for now, but he needs real care soon." Lena's mind worked quickly. Stay put and risk encirclement, move and risk ambush. She hated both. She chose movement. "Pack up," she ordered. "We're heading for the dry riverbed 2 clicks east, cover and concealment." They moved fast, silent except for the rustle of gear. Diaz and Rafi carried Ellison's stretcher between them, careful and steady. The desert stretched endlessly around them, golden light painting the rocks. The air was thin, crackling with unseen eyes. Halfway to the riverbed, a low, mournful sound echoed, a single rifle shot far away. Not aimed at them, just a reminder. Lena stopped, scanning the horizon. A crow wheeled overhead, its shadow flickering across her boots. She whispered to herself, too quiet for the squad to hear, "You're not breaking me." The riverbed offered shallow cover, high banks carved by storms long gone. They settled Ellison near a shaded ledge. Rafi set up overwatch while Harris positioned the Humvee for a quick exit. Diaz crouched beside Lena, his eyes searching hers. "Why us?" She didn't lie. "Because we're a message." Message to who? She looked toward the empty horizon where the ridge met the sky. To everyone watching. The words felt heavier than the rifle on her back. As the morning stretched on, the silence deepened, not a peaceful silence but the kind that grows teeth. Lena kept scanning the ridges, her mind replaying every detail of the night. The decoys, the voice, the vanished figure. Somewhere out there, a sniper was watching. Someone who knew her name, her history, maybe even her regrets. She adjusted her scope again and whispered, "I'm still here." And in that whisper was both a challenge and a vow. Whatever game they were playing, she would not be the piece they sacrificed. The first shot came like a crack of thunder, sharp, clean, and terrifyingly precise. Lena dove into the sand, heart hammering. The bullet had bitten the bank inches from her shoulder, throwing a spray of dust across her cheek. "Contact," Harris shouted, his voice tight with adrenaline. Rafi rolled behind a boulder, scanning the ridgeline. "Sniper, North Ridge." Another shot split the air, closer this time. A stone fragment nicked Lena's ear, warm blood tracing down her neck. The world shrank to the hiss of sand and the smell of gunpowder. She pressed her body flat against the bank and counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. The pause between shots wasn't random, it was measured, calculated. She swallowed hard, tasting grit. "They're not trying to kill me yet. Not yet." Ellison groaned on the stretcher, his face pale. Diaz shielded him with his own body, whispering reassurances that sounded too much like prayers. Rafi's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Can't get an angle. Whoever it is, they're good." The ridge was high, broken by jagged rocks. Perfect sniper territory, perfect theater. Lena steadied her breathing, raised her scope just enough to sweep the ridge in small increments. Nothing. Only sunlight and shadows. Then movement. A glint of glass, almost playful, as if to say you're looking in the wrong place. Another shot screamed past, gouging the sand near Ellison's head. Diaz cursed, dragging the stretcher deeper under cover. "Smoke," Lena ordered. Harris tossed a canister, and the valley filled with a ghostly white haze. They shifted positions quickly, zigzagging under the cover. Lena's boots dug into the soft earth as she crawled to a new angle. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She set up her rifle, waited. The smoke thinned. A faint silhouette flickered on the far ridge, slim, steady, confident. She squeezed the trigger, once controlled. The echo cracked against the rocks. A pause, silence. Then laughter, low, chilling. It rolled across the ridge, carried by the wind. Rafi swore softly, "That's a woman's voice." Lena felt the sound coil around her ribs like a memory she didn't want, a voice she thought she'd buried. She whispered almost involuntarily, "Anna." Diaz glanced at her, "What?" But Lena didn't answer. Her chest tightened. The photograph in her pocket felt suddenly heavier. The voice called again, faint but distinct, "Still hiding, Lena." The squad froze. Rafi muttered, "Who the hell is Anna?" Lena's fingers trembled on the rifle grip. She forced herself to breathe, to think. An old friend. But friend didn't cover the weight behind that name. Anna had been her shadow once, her rival on the range, her partner on covert overwatch. Years ago, during an op gone wrong, Anna had vanished under fire. Everyone had presumed her dead. Now here she was, alive, hunting her. Another shot tore into the sand, deliberate but wide. A warning. Lena's mind spun. Why turn on her? What had she missed? Diaz's voice was sharp, urgent. "We can't stay here." Lena nodded, but her eyes stayed locked on the ridge. Harris prepped the Humvee. Rafi, flank east, find a way to draw her fire. Diaz, keep Ellison down. They moved quickly. Dust swirled, boots pounding. Rafi scrambled up a shallow slope, his silhouette bait against the skyline. Another shot snapped, close but not lethal. Lena watched, heart aching. Anna wasn't trying to slaughter them outright. She was hurting them, forcing choices. She gritted her teeth and whispered into the wind, "Not this time." She darted from cover, sprinting low to a new vantage point. Her boots slipped on loose gravel, but she caught herself, swung the rifle into position. The ridge was a smear of golden light and jagged shadows. Then she saw it, a faint shimmer, a scope reflection barely there. She steadied her breath, finger poised. A memory slammed into her. Anna's laugh under a starlit sky, the two of them sharing a single protein bar on a mountain patrol. Anna's voice whispering, "Promise me, if anything ever happens, you finish the mission." Her hands trembled. She exhaled slowly, took the shot. The echo rolled like distant thunder. Silence, no return fire. Harris's voice buzzed, "Did you?" But then the laughter came again, farther away now, taunting, moving. Lena felt both relief and dread. She hadn't stopped Anna. She'd only confirmed she was real. The Humvee's engine growled as Harris brought it around. Diaz hoisted Ellison in. Rafi slid into the back, sweat streaking the dust on his face. Lena climbed in last, her gaze lingering on the ridge. As they sped across the barren flats, the radio crackled briefly, just a hiss, then Anna's voice, soft and mocking, "Still chasing ghosts, Lena." The line went dead. Lena stared out at the endless horizon, her throat tight. The mission was no longer just survival. It was personal now, painfully, dangerously personal. And she knew, deep down, that Anna's betrayal wasn't the whole story. Someone else was moving the pieces. Someone who wanted this confrontation. The desert wind howled through the cracked window. Lena whispered to herself more than anyone, "This ends with answers." The road was little more than a scar across the desert, and the Humvee rattled over it like an old memory refusing to fade. Lena gripped the door handle, her knuckles white against the chipped paint. The radio stayed dead. No command, no backup, no familiar voices to anchor her. Only the rattle of loose gear and Ellison's shallow breathing. Rafi broke the silence. "She had a clean shot twice. She could have taken us out." "She wanted us alive," Lena said quietly. Diaz met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Why? To finish some personal vendetta." Lena shook her head, but doubt gnawed at her. "Anna doesn't waste bullets for ego." A gust of wind rattled the cracked window. Somewhere in that dry howl was the echo of a friendship torn by years and secrets. They reached an abandoned way station, a crumbling building of sun-bleached stone and broken windows. Harris slowed the Humvee, scanning for movement. "Clear enough," he said, though his voice betrayed unease. They pulled in, the tires crunching gravel. Diaz and Rafi carried Ellison inside, laying him on a tattered cot. The smell of rust and dust hung thick in the air. Lena walked the perimeter, her boots sinking into soft sand. Every shadow felt suspect. Then faint movement near a ruined wall. A scrap of cloth fluttered, pinned beneath a rock. She approached cautiously, heart thudding. The cloth was an old mission bandana, hers and Anna's from years ago. The corner was marked with a tiny, deliberate slash. A sign. Lena's breath caught. Rafi's voice came low behind her. "She's leaving breadcrumbs." "Or traps," Lena replied. As dusk settled, they lit no fire. The desert's chill crept in, sharp against their skin. Harris and Diaz took first watch. Rafi patched what he could of Ellison's wound. Lena sat near the doorway, staring at the bandana in her hands. Memories drifted, Anna teaching her to read wind currents on a sniper course, the two of them laughing over stolen coffee rations. Anna's last look, years ago, before she disappeared under a hail of gunfire. A whisper of boots on sand snapped her back. A shadow crossed the doorway. Lena's rifle was up instantly. Anna stepped into the moonlight, rifle slung casually across her back. Her face was harder now, weathered, but her eyes still held that fierce spark. Lena's voice trembled. "You're alive." Anna smirked faintly, disappointed. Rafi stirred awake, but Lena motioned him to stay down. Anna took a step closer, her tone low. "They left me, Lena, you left me. I crawled out of that canyon alone, and when I tried to come back, command buried the op, said we were ghosts. Said you?" She stopped, eyes glittering. "They told me you signed off on it." Lena's stomach dropped. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Anna's voice cracked. "I watched them execute civilians to cover their tracks, and when I tried to expose it," she tapped her rifle. "This was the only voice they understood." Lena swallowed hard. The world tilted, her own memories colliding with Anna's accusations. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was systemic, rotten from the top. "Why drag my team into it?" Lena whispered. Anna's gaze softened for a moment. "Because you still have a chance to do the right thing. They'll erase you, Lena, just like they erased me." The sound of the Humvee door creaking broke the moment. Harris had stepped outside, weapon drawn. Anna's eyes flicked to him, then back to Lena. "Decide fast," she said, backing into the shadows. "Either you're with me or you're already dead." She melted into the night, silent as the wind. Lena lowered her rifle slowly, her hands shaking. Rafi emerged, face pale. "What the hell just happened?" Lena didn't answer. Her mind replayed every word Anna had said. If Anna was right, command wasn't just incompetent, they were corrupt. And if Lena reported Anna now, they'd bury the truth along with all of them. Diaz came to the doorway, his eyes searching Lena's face. "Ma'am." She met his gaze, the weight of choice pressing down like a physical force. "We're not going back to base," she said finally. Her voice was calm, but her chest ached. "Not yet." Rafi frowned. "Then where?" "Somewhere they can't reach us until I know the truth." The squad exchanged uneasy glances. Lena turned back to the desert, the horizon lit faintly by distant lightning. She felt the photograph in her pocket again, the edges worn smooth. The memories of Anna weren't just ghosts now, they were warnings. For the first time all night, she allowed herself to feel it fully. The fear, the anger, the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could make this right. The desert wind carried a faint echo, or maybe just her own heartbeat. "Decide fast." Lena whispered to herself, "I'm not done yet." The storm came without warning, wind screaming over the flats, sand slashing like knives. The Humvee crawled along the dry creek bed, its headlights cutting fragile tunnels through the chaos. Inside, the squad was silent, faces drawn tight. Lena's mind raced. The command she'd trusted had buried the truth. Anna's accusations, her voice in the darkness, it all fit too well with the half-whispered rumors Lena had once dismissed. They reached an old comms relay, half-collapsed, cables dangling like vines. Lena chose it for its height, its line of sight. She needed proof. "Set perimeter," she said, stepping out into the roaring wind. Her voice carried, brittle against the storm. Diaz and Rafi braced Ellison in the Humvee, wrapping him in thermal blankets. Harris climbed the relay tower to scan the horizon. Lena knelt in the sand, pulled a battered data drive from her pack. The documents, pulled in secret over the past weeks, outlined covert ops that had gone wrong and cover-ups signed by names she once saluted. She had to get the transmission out. But a shadow moved on the ridge. Anna. Through the sand haze, Anna stood silhouetted, rifle lowered. The wind swallowed Lena's voice. "You didn't have to hurt them." Anna stepped closer, her hair whipping. "I warned you. They'll erase you like they erased me. You think your evidence changes anything, they'll call it treason." Lena's fingers tightened on the drive. She felt the weight of her squad behind her, their breaths, their trust, their silent fear. Another lightning flash split the sky, revealing two distant vehicles cresting the horizon. Command's retrieval team or a kill squad. Anna saw it too. They're not coming to rescue you, Lena. Lena raised her rifle, but not to aim, just to show she wasn't surrendering. I can't run, not again. Anna's eyes shone with something, regret maybe. She lowered her own weapon. Then make it count. The first vehicle fired, a warning burst that tore through the sand. Harris yelled from the tower. Rafi swore, readying his rifle. Diaz shielded Ellison. Lena took a deep breath. She thought of the night Anna vanished, of the villagers' faces burned into her memory, of the promises she'd made and broken. Then she stepped forward out of cover into the open. The headlights pinned her, a lone figure in the storm. She raised the data drive high, a silent declaration. Over the comms, a voice crackled. Staff Sergeant Lena Rowe, stand down or be fired upon. She didn't flinch. She placed the drive on a rock, hands slow, deliberate. The storm's roar swallowed the world. Anna's voice, barely audible over the wind. They'll kill you. Lena's reply was steady, almost soft. Not before they hear me. She slung her rifle aside, pulled the sat phone from her vest, its signal weak but flickering, and pressed send. The transmission whined, static-filled, fragile, but it went. The first vehicle edged closer. A spotlight blinded her. Then a sharp whistle. Anna's shot cracked through the storm, shattering the spotlight. The desert plunged back into darkness, headlights now useless in the sand-swept chaos. The retrieval team hesitated, their line of sight broken. Rafi and Harris used the distraction to reposition, Diaz gripping Ellison's stretcher tighter. Another burst of lightning lit the scene, Anna already fading into the storm, a ghost returning to the shadows. The vehicles withdrew, slowly at first, then faster, tires kicking sand in retreat. Lena stood alone in the storm's eye, her breath loud in her helmet. She bought them a chance. Maybe only that, but it was enough. By dawn, the storm had passed. The world was silent again, painted in muted gold. The relay tower loomed against the sky, cables swaying gently. Diaz approached, his voice rough. Think the transmission got through. Lena didn't look up. It only had to once. Rafi joined them, his expression unreadable. They'll come for us again. She nodded, let them. She walked a few steps away, kneeling to pick up the bandana Anna had left on a rock. The edges were frayed, but the fabric was warm from the sun. She folded it carefully, sliding it into her pocket beside the photograph. She didn't cry. She couldn't, not now. Her tears stayed hidden, but the weight in her chest shifted, lighter somehow. The squad packed up in silence, the Humvee engine growling back to life. As they drove east toward the uncertain horizon, Lena looked back once, the relay shrinking behind them, the desert swallowing their tracks. Somewhere out there, Anna was watching. Maybe alive, maybe already a rumor. But Lena knew this. Anna's courage had not been in the shots fired or the threats spoken. It had been in the quiet choices, the silent sacrifices. The desert wind whispered across the empty flats, carrying no applause, no triumph. Only a simple truth. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And that quiet courage, the choice to stand, even unseen, would echo longer than any gunfire. It would become the loudest memory of that long night.